On a very crucial day where the negotiations are taking place between Russia and Ukraine, we are joined by a very special guest, Team Zelenskyy's Igor Zhukov, who's the deputy head in President Zelenskyy's office. He also heads the foreign policy division. Mr. Zhukov, thank you very much for speaking to India's largest news network, who's been camping here in Ukraine over the last 20 days. We have been documenting the kind of atrocities that have been committed on the ground. Mr. Zhukov, thank you very much. Let me straight away begin by asking you, we are talking on a day when the fourth round of talks are going to take place between your country and Russia. What are we really looking at? What is it that you are going to put on the negotiating table?
Thank you for having me. As we speak, the fourth round of Russian-Ukrainian negotiations on the level of delegation is taking place. What do we have on the table? First of all, we are ready for the diplomatic solution. That's what my president keeps telling about from the practically first day of war of Russia against Ukraine. Ukrainian demands on the negotiations are as follows. So first of all, definitely immediate ceasefire regime over all territory of Ukraine. This is very important, and this is the raison sine qua non. So we will not start the real negotiations without a real ceasefire in Ukraine. Secondly, we need the withdrawal of Russian troops from the territory of Ukraine. This is very important condition for them not to stay on the territory of Ukraine, for them not to capture the cities that they are now capturing, some smaller cities in southern, eastern Ukraine and in north Ukraine. Thirdly, we need a strict security guarantees for Ukraine in order such terrible war not happen against my country in future. That's why when we are talking about negotiation table, it's not only two presidents should be sitting there. Also, the representatives of the world community should be present, our immediate neighbors, as well as the bigger international partners, states, to sit together and to talk and to negotiate and to sign possible new security guarantees for Ukraine and possible new security system in Europe.
Mr. Zhukov, I would like to draw your attention to a comment that basically came in from the Russian negotiating team, Leonid Slutsky, who says that they believe that there has been a significant progress between the talks that have taken place between Moscow and Kiev, and there could be, very soon, an agreement could be signed. Could you elaborate a little bit? What is this progress that are we really talking about? We've also heard the advisor to the Ukrainian president, Mr. Polodyatsky, who's also spoken about a significant progress that has been made. What are we to understand about this significant progress?
Well, I can share the evaluation about the progress. Maybe significant would be a little bit too strong a word. But yes, comparing to the situation when the negotiations were starting several weeks ago, and practically absence of constructive position from the Russian side, when they only talked about by ultimatum and red lines. So today the position has changed in a constructive manner. So they are really talking to Ukrainian delegation in a much more constructive manner. Yes, the conditions and the positions of two delegations are now at least exchanged and discussed. And right you are, as a result of these negotiations, and obviously those negotiations will end by the negotiations on the highest level by two presidents. But as a result, there has to be an agreement or a complex of agreements in order to bring peace to my country and bring new security guarantees to my country. Not the kind of security guarantees we used to have from 1994, when we were deprived of the third largest nuclear potential in the world. But instead of this, just received a piece of paper called Budapest Memorandum. And when Russia attacked Ukraine in 2014, this memorandum has never worked. The same as they started the war, the open war in 2022, those memorandum was absolutely non-instrumental. So we do not want assurances. We need a strict, severe, hard security guarantees for my country and for the rest of the European continent.
Mr. Zofka, I want to understand, when you say strict security guarantees, what does it really entail? Because many would say that there is some amount of ambiguity. We have seen the talk between your foreign minister and Russian foreign minister leading to some sort of a disaster. No progress was made. So what is it that, in terms of strict security guarantees, that you are demanding? What is it that you are exactly demanding at this stage?
Well, first of all, we shouldn't say something clear now as the negotiations are continue. But I mean, I will give you a very simple example. Ukraine does not belong to any military bloc for the time being, but we need a security guarantee, a very strict security guarantee for my country, for how Ukraine should be a country which will not be attacked by any aggressor. So, being a non-military or or a neutral state, we need a bilateral or multilateral security guarantees that Ukraine will never be invaded. We need to understand how our armed forces would operate without having enough potential. So it's still under negotiations, and definitely I will not reveal here all the peculiarities of the negotiations. But again, the results should be very strong, and my country should never experience foreign aggression in future.
Mrs. Zofka, I would like to draw your attention now to the other very crucial statement that has been made by your president, and I would like to quote your president. And this is what he says: "Our mission is clear, to do everything we can to ensure a meeting of the two presidents, the meeting that I'm sure people are waiting for." My question to you is that, does this mean that you are willing to declare a neutral status vis-a-vis NATO? That is Ukraine today in a position that you will not want to be aligned with any particular bloc? Is that at least on the cards, that you are at least contemplating at this point in time?
Well, Ukraine expressed its desire several times and throughout the last decades to be a part of NATO. Unfortunately, for the time being, this is not the case from NATO allies. They are not ready to accept Ukraine, neither today nor in the foreseeable future. In this case, if a potential neutral status or a non-bloc status for some period of time will bring peace to my country, yes, this is negotiable. But once again, you have to understand that simple declaring the neutral status or non-bloc status brings nothing to Ukraine. We're in the middle of Europe. We're in the middle of European continent. We will be neighboring Russia forever because this is our neighbor. So instead of having the membership in this or that bloc, we need to have these guarantees which I'm talking about. Ukraine should be defended. Yes, we can defend it by ourselves. That's what we are showing now. We are fighting not only for Ukraine today, we are fighting for every European Union member, because it will not stop aggressor here in my country. Russia will further go to Lithuania or to Poland or to France and Germany. And everyone should understand this. We are ready to stop the aggressor in Ukraine. On the contrary, instead of this, we need the support of all our European partners and friends, and the international one as well, by the way. Be it weapon, be it securing our sky, or be it hard security guarantees, which will help us not to repeat those kinds of aggressions in future.
So correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Zokwa. So today the position that Ukraine is willing to take is that you're willing to become a neutral state, not align with any particular bloc, provided there is enough security guarantee that is provided to you by Russia. Am I correct?
Absolutely. Those two issues are going in one single complex. Only if we are having enough security guarantees from all the major states, from not only our neighbors, from not only Russia, because you cannot now trust Russia. So all our neighbors, all the major international partners, only if we have this complex of security guarantees, we can think about possible status of my country, be it neutral or non-bloc or anything else.
Let's also look at some other aspects, get into some specifics, because you've also spoken extensively about the presidential level talks that perhaps is going to yield some result on the ground. Let me quote what the Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov had to say. And he says President Putin doesn't reject meeting President Zelensky. Probably such a necessity will take place, but for this we need to undertake preparatory work on the Belarusian track. As I understand, Mr. Zhukov, you are not very comfortable. Your country is not very comfortable with any talks happening on the soil of Belarus. So how is this going to really work out? What is it that you are planning, and what is it that you are willing to tell the Russians at this stage?
No, the territory doesn't matter for the time. For instance, currently the negotiations are taking place in the video format. Again, today everything is possible. It's not necessarily to meet on this or that territory. You lose time for logistics, for transportation, or whatever. So we are absolutely fine with having the video conference on the preparatory stage. Right, you are. The final negotiations, the final agreements will be reached only at the level of heads of governments and states. But in order to have this, and that's what we hear from the Russian side, that's where we can agree that the delegation should still work a little bit more time to reach these negotiations. The only bad thing is Ukraine doesn't have this time because, every minute, every hour, unfortunately, soldiers or civilians are dying in Ukraine because of the air bombardments, because of the artillery working, because of the cruise missiles flying over Ukraine, because they're hitting civilian targets, just like it was the case today in the night when they hit a multi-story building in Kiev, when they hit a plant in Kiev, when they hit some objects in the south of Mykolaiv region. They're bombarding Kharkiv severely. They are encircling the city of Mariupol, which is on the south of Ukraine, in the Sea of Azov. And the situation is disastrous there. 400,000 people are held hostages, being deprived of water, food, electricity, medicine. And we're asking the international community, and by the way, this is also the subject of negotiations, that please provide a humanitarian corridor from Mariupol. For the practically 2 weeks, they are blocking this humanitarian corridor. So no, they are not letting people out, and even will not let the humanitarian convoys coming into the city of Mariupol, bringing elementary food, water supplies, etc. So this should be also reached first at the negotiations. People should be thought over first, and then comes the next provisions.
I would like to take one more question and then introduce my colleague who's from our sister network. He's going to ask you a question in Hindi, which I'll translate. But before that, let me take one more question with you, Mr. Zhukov. That is, there are two very interesting statements that have been made in the last 48 hours. One that came in from Russian President Vladimir Putin, and I'm quoting this for you. He says, there are certain positive shifts. Negotiators on our side tell me. Then just a day later, your president said that Russia had now adopted a fundamentally different approach in talks to end the war. The signal seems to be positive from both ends. What I want to ask you is that what has really shifted in the last 2 to 3 days, what we are witnessing, and the entire world would like to know now. Are we really looking forward to some sort of a ceasefire agreement? If so, what would be the contour of that ceasefire agreement, and perhaps a stage where the war ends perhaps sometime this week? Is there any timeline that you're looking at?
Well, what significantly changed is that Russians started not only to dictate, not only to make ultimatums, not only to talk, but to listen to Ukrainian position. Ukraine will not surrender. Ukraine will not capitulate. Ukrainian armed forces will fight to the end. So right you are. The immediate result of the negotiation should be a ceasefire. Fortunately, this is not the case. But you are rightfully saying, and you are rightfully quoting both presidents, that the mood is starting to be generally positive, and we put much hope on this. When the negotiations will end, no one can tell you now. Not the direct people who are taking part in the negotiation teams, not other institutions. We are hoping that it will happen as soon as possible. That's a matter of life and death to Ukrainians.
I want to understand Ukraine's position vis-a-vis Crimea and Donbas region.
The position is very simple. Ukrainian Donbas and Ukrainian Crimea are Ukrainian territories, and we will not give away a single inch of Ukrainian territory.
So you are not willing to recognize Donbas region as an independent region. That still remains the position, and that's non-negotiable, if I understand.
Definitely not.
Mr. Zokwa, my colleague wants to take one question with regards to today's meeting. If Mridul can just come in and I'll translate that once again for you.
बिल्कुल लगातार जिस तरीके की मीटिंग चल रही है उसको लेकर मेरा एक सवाल है, क्योंकि तरह तरह के आरोप एक तरफ लगाए जा रहे हैं, दूसरी तरफ चाइना और अमेरिका भी एक तरीके से सही जो सुझाव है या सॉल्यूशन की तरफ देख रहा है, उनके बीच में भी लगातार मीटिंग्स हो रही है। यूक्रेन की उसमें क्या भूमिका है और क्या एक विक्टिम की तरह इसे माना जाए, क्या ऐसी भूमिका उन्हें नजर आती है?
Mr. Zokwa, what my colleague was asking you is that we are talking on a day when the US National Security Advisor will be meeting China's top diplomat, that too in Rome. What we would like to know is that has your president spoken to someone in Washington or President Biden with regards to this particular meeting? Because there is this larger fear or larger understanding, if I may say so, Mr. Zokwa, that somewhere down the line this is also appearing to become a proxy war, because these talks that are happening between America and China, do you think that that could be the real solution?
Well, first of all, my president regularly communicates with President Biden, and definitely President Biden has all the latest information about latest development in Ukraine. President Biden knows Ukrainian position, knows position of my president very well. So it's very good that during today's talk, his national security advisor will have this position discussed with high-level Chinese representative. We also, if you ask me whether China and the US can help of bringing peace to Ukraine, yes, that's what they ask from the international community. I told you that any help, any assistance from any high-level foreign leader would be welcome. So they are discussing today Ukraine. Definitely the US side will share the results of today's negotiation with their Ukrainian counterparts. Chief of Staff of President of Ukraine, Mr. Andriy Yermak, is in constant negotiations with his US counterpart, Mr. Sullivan. So yes, we are taking positively today's talk.
We are also talking on a day when Israel has offered to mediate between Russia and Ukraine. A lot of news reports were coming in with regards to the talks that have already taken place between President Zelenskyy and the Prime Minister of Israel. So a lot of claims, counterclaims. The real picture as far as Israel's role is concerned, that's not known, Mr. Zokwa. Why don't you tell our viewers what's the position like? And have you all actually discussed about this mediation, the possibility of a mediation, Israel playing that particular role between Russia and Ukraine?
Yes, my president spoke several times with Prime Minister Bennett of Israel, and the core of these negotiations was, yes, the possible mediation role of Israel. You know that Prime Minister Bennett even met with President Putin during the Shabbat. He paid his visit to Russia, and during this visit and after this visit and before this visit, he was also speaking to President Zelenskyy. Again, Chief of Staff of Mr. President, Mr. Andriy Yermak, is speaking to his counterpart, National Security Advisor in Israel. Yes, it is possible for Ukraine to receive or to positively evaluate the Israeli mediation role. And that's what we are doing. That's what we are taking into account. My president even said that he would be ready to meet President Putin in Jerusalem. So Israel is playing a very important role in today's mediation process, and we count on its results.
I'll take one more question from my colleague Mridul.
बिल्कुल, एक मेरा सवाल है। इससे पहले मैं एक जरूर सवाल करना चाहूंगा, क्योंकि लगातार सैंक्शन लगाए जा रहे हैं। क्या जितने भी सैंक्शन अभी तक रशिया पर लगाए गए हैं वो बहुत हद तक क्या कोई भूमिका निभा सकते हैं युद्ध रोकने में? यूक्रेन को क्या लगता है उस पर?
A lot has already been spoken, Mr. Zokwa, of the kind of sanctions that have been levied on Russia. Do you really see some sort of a benefit of it, or you feel that not enough has been done as far as those sanctions that have been, levied against Russia, or more needs?
Well, definitely sanctions do matter, and we are satisfied that those long-lasting sanctions which my president demands, and I would like to remind you that before the war started, my president was talking about preventive sanctions vis-a-vis Russia, preventive sanctions which could have stopped a war of Russia against Ukraine. Unfortunately, he was not heard by that time, nor by our US counterparts, nor by our European Union counterparts. And the war has started. So now, only now, the international community started to introduce sanctions. Some sanctions are quite strong, as some US or Great Britain sanctions. But if we're talking about the European Union sanctions, they are still lagging behind. So yes, they introduced partially the personal sanctions, for instance, against some oligarchs or high-level representatives. But if you are talking about serious impact of sanctions, serious immediate impact of sanctions, this is what is still lacking.